Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody's doing okay and staying safe and healthy and enjoying a beautiful, but looks like windy day outside. This is Scott Cummings in College Station, and I'm joined today by Paul Pope, our evaluation specialist. And we're here to do some more training on Qualtrics beyond the basics. So we're going to start delving into or digging into some of the other options on Qualtrics as a tool that you can use. We're not going to cover every other feature today, but we'll hit on a few. We're trying to keep this session to less than an hour, and we'll come back and do another session down the road. If you have anything, put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring it while Paul is talking. And also, if you would, put your name and your county or your unit in the chat so we know who's joined us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul and we'll get started.
Okay, Scott, can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine, Paul.
Okay, so I guess you can start recording. Howdy, everybody. Good afternoon. Good to be with you. Thanks for attending. Scott did a really good job presenting the basics of Qualtrics a few weeks ago, so my goal today is to build upon that. And so this session is a follow-up that covers some other topics beyond the basics that you might find useful now or maybe in the future. And I also want to address a few questions posed to me by agents and specialists about Qualtrics. So basically today I'll be covering an overview here, a few survey topics that are not part of the default selections. I'm going to cover a little bit about matrix and side-by-side questions, some on skip logic, and then we'll finish up with the Qualtrics mailer. So, and then of course we'll answer any questions you might have at the end as well. So if you have any questions, you can just put it there in the chat and Scott will be monitoring those. And so we'll just see how it goes here. So what you're looking at is my default desktop interface here in Qualtrics after I log in. And again, like Scott mentioned in the last session, once you start to get a lot of surveys, it's really good to start organizing them over here on the left into folders. And that way you can manage those surveys a lot better. You can see at the top, I have 125 surveys currently, 72 were shared with me, and then I've put them into all these different categories, which really helps to easily find and organize surveys. So the one I'm working in today is the Zoom training. And I'm going to start by clicking on this first survey, and I'm going to go over a few survey options that you may not be aware of, but you may find useful. So this is just a real simple 3-question survey. And you can go up here at the top and click on survey options. And what you're seeing, the check marks or the radio buttons, those are the ones that by default are selected for you. So, but 2 you might want to also consider is this prevent ballot box stuffing. A 4-H agent relayed to me a few weeks ago that she was having a survey that was kind of a voting application, that it was either voting on club memberships or leadership, or it was a contest like select the best image or something along those lines. And she was concerned that people were double voting, triple voting. So I mentioned that there is an option here in Qualtrics for prevent ballot box stuffing. And so that prevents somebody from taking a survey twice. However, I did read in the documentation that someone who's savvy enough can actually clear the browser cache or use a different device or a different browser and get around that. But I think for the most part, that would solve the issue of people trying to take a survey twice. So, so that's one option that probably as a matter of habit, you should always go ahead and check that particular option. The other one is down here under survey, or excuse me, under survey termination, instead of the default end of survey message. And let me show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to do a preview of the survey, answer a few questions, and then when I'm complete, that's the standard or default end of survey message. It's adequate. It works fine for most surveys, but you do have the option to do a custom end of survey message. And so you click on that, and you can either select one that you've already written before, or you can actually start a new message. I'm going to select one that it's called End of Survey with Resources. So I'm going to select that and save it. Take the survey again. And you can see that the message now is different. It's a custom message. And so this was also in response to an agent question. They wanted to know, was there a way to, once someone completed the survey, to direct them to some resources for the program they just signed up for? So you can use a custom end of survey message just like this, and you can insert links to your program or to a future program activity. Or you can also insert actually PDF files or other types of files as well. So that's something to think about if you want to go beyond the standard message and actually direct them to some resources.
Hey, Paul?
Yeah.
Go back to the options. I'll add a third one to that list.
Okay.
At the very top, the back button.
Yeah.
Is a valuable option when you have surveys that are multiple pages. What that does is allows somebody when they're doing the survey to go back a page and maybe change an answer or fix an answer. So that back button is also a pretty valuable option to add for your survey options.
Yeah,
that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And so, in creating a new one, this is the options here, and there's more of them. This is where you can insert, like there, a survey link. You can insert an image, some other things as well, and then give it a description and save it. So if you want to ever look at those, if you go up here to library at the top right, besides surveys and graphics, there's also a message library. And this will be just for you under my name there. And so you can look at various others types of reminders. Like this is one for the beef cattle short course. So anyway, any message you create will be in your message library. Okay, so let's move on to some question types. Scott went over some of the basic ones in the last session, but I want to go over a few other ones that are, probably would be commonly used. And so here I'm going to create a new question. And then over here on the right, with the green button, is where you select different types of questions. One I wanted to mention was the matrix table. And those of you who are familiar with the customer satisfaction surveys, you'll recognize that this particular one is one we used in many of those surveys, where there's a 3, 4, or 5 point scale at the top, and then there's a number of items that are going to be rated using that same scale. So there's 3 points here, but you can always go over to the right, add more scale points, and also add more items as well. So also wanted to point out that you can also import questions. And here you want to do it from the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Research Library. And then under Question Library, and then Organizational Development, we have a number of preset questions here. One of them being some blocks of questions for customer satisfaction. And so if you just simply click on it and import, that'll come in to your survey like that. So that's a good example of a matrix type of question. Another type of question people ask about a lot is a retrospective post that you see quite often on the scan forms. Qualtrics calls that a side-by-side. And you can see it's kind of a general template. You can add here under columns, if you wanted 4 columns or 4 choices under each of those columns, you can just start adding, excuse me, you can add them like that. So there's, we don't put too many right there. So now you have 4 and 4 before and after, and you can label these before and after. So that's the way you do a retrospective post. Again, you can come in and do an import question from the TAMU Coles library under Question Library and OD. And then there's one right here that's already preset. And so you can import that, and it'll already have the 4 columns that you're used to. And it'll have the before versus after sections. And then you can just put in your statements and then add and multiply those statements as you need them. So any questions on those 2 particular types of survey types?
So Paul, there's a question about importing and editing. So the question is, can you import it and edit? Say there are 2 words to add. Yes, you can. My experience sometimes on importing stuff is if there's formatting in the document that you're importing from, sometimes it's hard to get that formatting cleared up in Qualtrics, but you certainly can do that.
Okay. Now, one question I do have often when people are using retrospective post in Qualtrics, they wonder why the results don't look like what they are accustomed to getting with scan forms. That's because in scan forms, we're scripting those custom tables within SPSS. Qualtrics just provides a very basic output, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. But there's a way around it, which I'm going to show you real quick. So this is an actual survey that someone shared with me, and it's using, the first question is a retrospective post dealing with irrigation. And so if you go to reports, Qualtrics is being slow.
Everything on campus is being slow today, so. Maybe come back to this, Paul.
All right. Let me try it one more time. Let's see. Here we go. So this is what it gives you, a confusing chart. This is the before section, and it tries to cram all 7 items into this one chart. That's the before versus after, and it's really not very usable at all. What is usable is, besides the chart, they also give you these tables, which include the means for the before items, and then the percent at good and excellent for each of those items, and then the same thing for the after means, and the after percentage good and excellent. So what you can do to try to get to those same tables that you're used to getting is to go to Share Report once you're in Reports, and do a CSV, and then select all, which unclicks everything, and then just select those first 2 items, the before and after, for your retrospective post, and export those pages. And then download it. And you're not seeing the Excel, right, Scott? Anyway, what it'll do is it'll download a spreadsheet, and I'll show you what that looks like. That looks like this, and so it gives you those same tables that you were looking at in Qualtrics. And so from there, it's just a matter of using Excel, a few calculations in order to finally get your before and after mean together, and then the percent change, and then the percent at good or excellent before versus after, and that percent point difference. And so in the end, you're going to end up with a table in Excel that looks like this, which is the equivalent of what you're used to seeing in SPSS, and then the same thing on the second table. So all this is under this document using retrospective post data from Qualtrics. So if you're interested in those custom tables, that's the way you do it. Okay, we're going to move on to skip logic, unless there's any questions on what I just talked about. Okay, well, what is skip logic? Skip logic is going to a future point in the survey based on a response you have to the current question. So on a scan form, you're used to seeing it as, if you answer yes, please skip to question whatever. So that's skip logic. And so you can do that same sort of thing in Excel, or excuse me, in Qualtrics. So this is a kind of an A&R regional form type of survey. And you can see skip logic right here, that little down arrow, that means there's skip logic. And so you can always go over here to options and remove it if you don't want it. But so we're going to remove it, and I'm going to put it back in to show you how it works. But before you start skip logic, this is important. There's 3 things you need to do. Number 1 is have all your questions in the survey. So you want to get to a point where you don't add any more or remove any more. And then the next point is make sure everything's in the same or in the order that it should be. So question 4, for example, is going to be the triggering question. And the questions to be skipped are the ones right after it. So you want to make sure all those are in the same order, or excuse me, in the correct order. And you can move questions by going to the left here and using the up and down arrows to move them up and down. So number 1, have all your questions. Number 2, make sure they're in the right order. And then number 3, once you have those 2 things, go to the top and go to Tools, Auto Numbering, and then do Sequential Numbering. And excuse me, what that does is starts with Q1 and then goes down to Q2, Q3, all the way down. And you'll want that anyway, because whenever you export the data, say to Excel, it's a lot easier to compare the data you're looking at to the survey if all the question names are in order. So once you've had those 3 things, let's look at the actual skip logic. Here's a question. Number 5, which of the following best captures the anticipated economic benefit? Or excuse me, sorry, it's number 4 I'm thinking of. Do you anticipate an economic benefit as a result of something you learned from this activity? So that's the triggering question. So we're going to click on it and then go to the right and click on Add Skip Logic. And see the little box comes up underneath it. And so what we want to do is, if somebody answers yes, we want them to continue with questions 5 and 6. But if they answer no, we want them to skip down to question 7, because Q5 and Q6 doesn't apply. So what we're going to say is the condition is if no is selected, and there's other choices, but what we want is if no is selected, then skip to question 7. And then we'll say done. And so let's see what that looks like. Do the preview. And so here's the question. Do you anticipate economic benefit? If you say yes, it should go to the 2 follow-up questions. And it did, which best captures the impact and what do you attribute it to, before you get to question 7 here. So let's test it again. Answering no to the question, and it should skip to question 7. And you can see it did. So that's one example of skip logic and how you apply it. Okay, let me give you another quick example. Let's say you did a program online and you decide, instead of giving them a survey link right at the end of the session, that you wanted to send the link a day or 2 later. One question you'll want to always ask, and it should be the very first question, is what you see here. Did you actually attend this workshop, this online workshop on this date? Maybe you had 40 people register for it, but only 28 attended. You'll still want to send your survey out to the 40 if you don't know who attended. And then you'll want to include this question. So the skip logic here you want to employ is, if they did not attend the workshop, then you don't want them to answer the survey at all. So let's click on Q1. Click on add skip logic. And this time we say if the condition is if they did not attend, no, if that's selected, then we want them to go to the end of the survey and say done. So let's preview that. If they say, yes, I did attend the survey, it's going to continue with the actual survey. But if they answer no, then they immediately taken to the thank you message. So whenever you do a follow-up to an online or even an in-person one, just make sure you have that first filtering question and then use your skip logic to basically move them out of the survey altogether if they didn't actually attend. So, any questions on that? And you can have both of those types of skip logic within one survey. You can have nested skip logic, so it can get complicated, but you want to make it as simple as possible and use it. Those two examples are two common ways you would use it. Any questions? This is going a little faster than I thought. We're all the way down to using the Qualtrics mailer now. So what is the Qualtrics mailer? It's an alternative within Qualtrics to using Outlook. Outlook is fine with an anonymous link. If you have a relatively small number of contacts, maybe 30 or less, something like that. But with the Qualtrics mailer, you can handle a lot of survey or a lot of contacts, in the thousands. So if you have a large number of contacts, that's one reason to use it. It's also good in situations where you need to track who actually responded to the survey, where you can see an actual email or someone's name in the database. And also, it's good for studies where you need to do follow-ups in order to try to increase response rates. It's a real nice tool as far as handling the contacts, and then any follow-ups are only sent to non-respondents, that sort of thing. So I would say in most cases, you would probably want to use the mailer unless it's a really small group and you don't mind sending an anonymous link to a few number of people via Outlook. So, okay, let's take a look at it. So here's an unpublished survey. I'm going to go ahead and publish it. In other words, it's ready, it's activated and ready to use. So I'm going to go over here to the right and say publish. And there it gives you the single anonymous link that everyone would use. At this point, we'll go to distributions in order to get to the Qualtrics mailer. You might wonder, we just did an anonymous link, so why are we seeing that as an option again? Well, if you click on it, that's simply the link we just generated. And so if you were ever to publish a survey and it gives you the link and then you go away and you don't remember what it is, or you didn't write it down or copy it, you just go under distributions and anonymous link, and you can get it from there, just like we just generated. So, but the Qualtrics mailer is right here. It's called emails. One thing that's confusing about Qualtrics is this personal links kind of sounds like custom links. Custom links is what we're creating with the Qualtrics mailer. That means every individual in the contact list gets a unique link, and only that one person can use. And that's the way it's trackable. This personal links, that is something you only use with a product like Outlook that's not Qualtrics. And frankly, it's not very easy to use, and I'm not sure why you would use it anyway. So for now anyway, just ignore personal links. So under distributions, what you want is emails, and that's the Qualtrics mailer. So the first thing it wants you to do is compose your survey invitation. And that's what it looks like. So the first field is the to field. So who you're sending it the survey to. Notice it already, at the bottom here, it already put in the custom link for each person. They can either click on the link here, or they can copy and paste the URL and put it in their browser. So here, you can either select a list you already have built, or you can do a new list. Let's do an existing list. Let me do this. So you just click on it, and you can see it has 3 contacts, what we just saw. So you can always select another one that's larger. In this case, so this one has 8, for example. Let's go back to the other one. The from, you generally don't have to change. The email that they're going to see that it's coming from is surveys@ag.tmu.edu. It's going to have your name and your email address. That can be changed. For example, we work with the beef cattle short course people, and when we send this out for them, I put in Dr. Cleary's name and his address. So if people have questions, it goes to him and not me. But generally, you just keep this the same, and it's going to be your information. You have another options on when to actually send this. The default is send in 1 hour, and we can just keep it at that for now. The subject is just something like follow-up survey to irrigation online workshop on whatever date. And here is where you start to compose your invitation message. I have one already typed in, so I'm just going to paste it in. So it'd say something like, "Dear participant, thank you for attending. The standard message, your views are important. Please take a few minutes to complete this survey next few days." And then with your name. One kind of neat thing you can do to personalize this, if you have first and last name in your contact list, you can replace this generic participant. Just delete it and go up here to pipe text, and then you can pipe from the contact field the first name. And so when Richard Smith gets this survey, it's going to say, "Dear Richard," and so forth. So one nice thing about that is it personalizes it, and you tend to get a greater response when you actually do that. So you can also insert within this message a survey link or a image. So you can really make the invitation look really nice. Okay, so once you have your message sent and your contact list set, the next important thing to do is not to send it out immediately, but to do a send preview email so you can look at it first. And you can put your email in here or somebody else's, a colleague, and hit send. And so that's going to show up in my Outlook email, and that way I can actually look at the invitation to make sure it all looks right. I can actually click on the link, make sure it's working okay. One thing I did read is if you have this first name customization here, that it's not going to show up in your preview, so just be aware of that. But so you always want to check it first before you send it. And then if everything looks right, if your survey's set, you can change this to send now and actually send it now. And click right there and send it. So that's your initial survey invitation using the Qualtrics mailer. Any questions on that? Okay, let me show you how to create a list, a new contact list within the mailer. And notice down here, this is only for lists that are 200 or less. If it's any more than that, then you're going to have to come up to contacts here at the top right and create it there. I'll show you that in a minute. So to create a new list, just do new list, and it's going to default to email, first name, and last name. The only required field is email address. But if you have the first name, last name, again, you can pipe in that first name like I just showed you. So let me get a list here from Excel. Okay, and you want to give this list a name like something like that. So I have 3 entries. You don't need, this doesn't work like a spreadsheet where you need to cover all the fields and go down. You just basically get on this first field cell, right click, and do paste as plain text. And it's going to bring in, if you have all 3 fields, it's going to bring all 3 of them in like that. At that point, you hit create. One thing I found, this is a caution with Qualtrics, is if you come in and want to start a new list, you hit create immediately, that actually hangs up Qualtrics and you have to get out of it. So don't hit that create until you've actually come in here and put in the information. So that's how you send out your first invitation. So of course you wait a while for people to respond. There was only 3 people in that contact list. They were all emails of mine, and I went in and for 2 of them I answered it. So when I go in later under distributions, there's the 2 that I answered. It's going to give you a nice chart of responses over dates, so you can see how the data collection is going. This completion rate is not the response rate, it's just the number started versus the actual number of completes. So the response rate is actually 2 out of 3, or 67% at this point. So if once you get to a point, and this should be in your initial invitation, that you like to have responses within the next 3 or 4 days or whatever. If you want to send a follow-up reminder just to non-respondents in order to increase your response rate, at this point, again, you would click on emails, and it'll give you a summary here of what happened with the first mailing. We got 3 emails were sent, 2 were finished. And so it gives you an opportunity here either you can schedule a thank you note if you want to send one just to respondents, if you want to end the survey at this point. Or you could do a follow-up, and this is what the schedule reminder is. So click on that. And then it's kind of the same, composing a invitation again. At this point, you would say, we hope you enjoyed the workshop. There's still time to complete the survey, and so forth. So again, you give them the same, write up the same note for the most part. And notice the to field is just to unfinished respondents, so it's only going to non-respondents only. So that's a really nice feature of the Qualtrics mailer. So any questions on that? So remember, you can create your contact list within the mailer if it's 200 entries or less. If you have more than that, then you need to come up here to the top right and hit contacts. And we'll do create contact list. Give it a name. So we're going to bring in last year's beef cattle short course just because it has a lot of entries. You don't need to put a folder name, just hit next. The source file needs to be a CSV format, not Excel. It doesn't accept Excel, but you can always save your Excel file as CSV. So we're going to import a file, browse to point to it. So I'm clicking on the CSV file, and you can see it already brought it in. There's 1,310 contacts. And down here, under Verify Fields, it gives you a chance to review a sample of the entries to make sure all the columns are correct. The first name is under first contact, and so forth. At this point, you just hit Add Contacts. And then it gives you this little box up here. It actually gives you a chance to view it. If you have a lot of entries, what you might find is you might see this box that says Consolidate Duplicates. That means you have a lot of duplicates. And the reason this is the case for beef cattle short course is you have a lot of couples that come together, and when they register, they're using the same email. So, so the list is going to have a lot of duplicates like this. So in Excel, or excuse me, in Qualtrics, you can individually, on a case by case, you can consolidate those if you want. If you have a small list and you don't have any duplicates, you don't even have to worry about that. So, and so, if you come over to contacts and then click on your name to get back to your list, you can see well, I'm not seeing it for some reason, but we did just create it, and sometimes it takes a while to show up. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the process for creating a larger lists that are over 200 entries. So that's really, that's today's session. We went over a few survey options, the 3 that were important to include beyond the default. We looked at the retrospective post, how to format those, and how to deal with the results later using Excel. Then we looked at skip logic, how that would be useful in certain situations, and then again, how to use the Qualtrics mailer, so which is a really nice feature in Qualtrics. So I guess there's any questions now at this point.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, will you go back to distributions and just show the QR code?
Let's see. And that would be for a one that's already published.
Yeah, that would work. I think there was a couple people that were interested in. So when you go to distribution,
okay, that one's closed already, or
yeah,
go somewhere else.
so when you go to distributions, you'll notice that there's a QR code, and basically just clicking on it, you can download that code. And notice what it says there, that this distribution type cannot track identifying information. The QR code only works with the anonymous link.
Okay.
So, but what we've done in the past with the QR code is we've printed it and put it on like a table tent or at the back of meeting notes or whatever. Then that person takes their phone, scans the QR code, and it goes straight to the survey. But again, that's an anonymous link, so you can't use it to do the email distribution.
Okay, but that's.
And then we have another question that says, is there a way to assign a simple link so you can put it put it on something so it's easy to type? Yeah, what you have to do there is get a URL shortener to do that, and there's a lot of free URL shorteners out there. Paul's actually got one.
There's
on our page. So I put this link in a little bit ago. This is the Qualtrics support page. So there's 3 right there, bit.ly, tiny URL, and then the tx.ag one, which comes through the Association of Former Students. So if you're part of the or have a Aggie Network login, you can actually use the tx.ag URL shortener. So,
And to get that login, you just have to be a former or current student.
yeah, and you know, it will take a URL in Qualtrics from about 35 or 40 characters down to about 7 or 8, 10 maybe.
Right.
A lot easier to use.
Yeah. To me, that was the nicest one of the three, because it's easy to use, and text.ag kind of goes with the agency name. Let's see.
So the page that he's on now is is the Qualtrics page that you know, Paul has worked on. That again, it's up in the text there. Let me put it back in again.
This is the actual page right here.
But it's that od.tamu.edu evaluation resources Qualtrics. So look at the link in your chat if you want to copy it. But there's a lot of resources there. Earlier, somebody asked about the printed version of the customer satisfaction survey. That's on here. So Paul, does just the standard customer satisfaction survey?
Yeah, in fact, that's what we're looking at right here. That's under download scan forms. Then under customer satisfaction, these are the scan forms, but there's an online section here. And those are the two, the adult and youth versions of customer satisfaction. And you can see I use the text.ag shorteners for those two. Now, one thing with these, it's a general survey that anybody can use. So before you can add your event or use it for your event, you need to send me a cover sheet just like you're doing a scan form set. And so I know the day of the event, the name and all that, and I can add that to the first question, because that's the very first question a participant needs to answer is, for what activity did you attend that you're rating? So that way, if I have the results of 100 different activities in the reports, I just simply filter on this first question, and I can actually get numbers for your particular event. So that's the way this particular Qualtrics survey works.
Okay, any other questions? We are recording this, and I will send out the recording probably by tomorrow. Would like to say that if you have, if you got questions, Paul and I are both available via email or phone if you want to try to learn how to do something. I would also say if you go to qualtrics.com, they have an extensive help system called Qualtrics University. We go to it quite regularly. Lots of great feedback from Qualtrics there. Really good help and support. And then I finally would just say that send us an email if you've got other things you want to learn how to do. And we will put those into a next training. So we're working on doing a Beyond the Basics 2 to pick up on a few things, different types of questions, and some more things that you can do with Qualtrics. So we'll stay on the line to see if you have any questions. If not, feel free to go ahead and log off, and we'll be in touch with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.